Welcome to my YouTube channel. At any time during this video, you can click on the lower right hand corner to subscribe to my channel. This is a short video on palette maintenance. I created this video because one of the questions I'm frequently asked is how I keep my paints so moist. Not everybody keeps their paints that way, but that's how I like to keep them. I like to work from a palette that has wells filled with paint, plenty of paint. And I like to keep those paints fairly moist, almost the consistency as when they come out of the tube. Now we'll go live to my studio and I'll describe the process that I use to maintain my palette. This is a travel palette. It actually hasn't been used for many months. It's probably been 7-8 months since this has even been opened. And you can see it's very dry. You can hear that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I bring paint like this back. I try not to let it get like this normally. My studio palette, which is underneath this, isn't like this. This doesn't exactly match my layout anymore, but I'm going to show you how you can bring back the paint. So what I do is I use this oiler bottle. It's got a needle, and I just go around the palette and pretty much cover the top with a little bit of water. It's probably about a half teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon of water. And I just squeeze it in there. Sometimes if there's a lot of paint, I'll squeeze a little bit more in there. And what's going to happen is I'm going to cover this up and let this sit overnight. And it's going to absorb this moisture into the paint. So basically I have a little pool of water and it's floating on top of the wells. But as it sits, it's going to get absorbed down into the pigment. And then I'm going to agitate it a little bit with a wooden stick or a toothpick. And I'll be able to start to bring this back to the consistency that I like to work. So now I'm going to cover this up. So my palette is dried overnight. Now we get this lid off. So yesterday I put about a half teaspoon or teaspoon of water on top of these, and they were very hard. So now, hopefully you can see, after the water has soaked in, my paints have come back to pretty much the consistency that they come out of the tube. And you can see how well that's mixed, loosened up there. Let's take one over here. So I just mix it up with a toothpick. It's ready to go like I prefer to have my paints. You can see how creamy that is. Now that had sat for about 8 months and dried up and was hard. And if I want to add a little bit more water to it, I'll just give it a spray and mix that in there. And you can see it's pretty much the consistency that comes out of the tube. Let's go over here. This one, it's not hard. There's parts of it that are a little stiff. You can see as the more I stir it, it starts to break up. And like this, I'll add a little bit more water and then just mix it up with my toothpick. And sometimes I don't get quite enough water in there, and I'll just put a little bit more, let it soak again. But you can see now how I can stir that around. And that was dry and hard. yesterday. So that's just an example of how you can bring back your paints. And I like mine to be a creamy consistency. So even if my palette has sat like this one has for some time, I can bring it back to the consistency I like. And I didn't add any paint to that. I just added water, let it soak overnight, and now it's back to a nice creamy consistency. What we're looking at now is my studio palette. This is porcelain, and it comes with a plastic lid. It's not an airtight cover by any means, but it does provide some containment of the moisture in my palette. So I make sure, if I'm going to be away for a period of time, I put that on. And when I'm done painting, I put it on until the next time I come back to my palette and paint. So my paints, I like to keep moist. Often people point that out and ask how I do that. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to do this short video. So you can see, if you look around, there's some little pools of water on a few of these. If I'm going to be painting for an extended period of time, I'll take this spray bottle and I'll mist the paints in my palette. And if I'm painting for a few hours, I'll do that a couple times while I'm painting. Because often when I paint, I only use maybe 8 colors, 9 colors, sometimes 10 colors. So I don't use all the paints in my palette. So even though I'm actively painting, the wells that I'm working out of, I'll be agitating, adding water to, but several of them will be sitting idle. And some of these I don't use near as often as the others, so they tend to get a little harder faster. But I continually miss that if it's going to be open for an extended period of time. Then when I'm done painting, again, I'll mist it, use that bottle. Sometimes I'll use this little bottle here. And then I'll put my lid on. Every now and then, I'm not as careful at keeping it moist, and it'll start to dry out. And when that happens, what I do is sometimes I'll put a little bit of water on top of each well, let it sit overnight, and then the next day I'll put some music on, then I just stir my paints. So I'll take a toothpick and I'll just go through one at a time and stir them up. If I need to add a little bit more water, I'll just squirt a little more water in there. But that's how I like to work. I like to keep my paints that way. That's certainly not the only way to do it. You have to do what works for you. Many people like their paints dry and their palette mixing area covered with paint, which is fine. It's all on how you want to work as an artist and what you're comfortable with. But every now and then, I'll come through and I'll stir my paints with a toothpick, and you know, they do get some contamination from other ones from time to time, from dipping the brush in and not rinsing it out. Just kind of part of the painting process, but I mix them up pretty well. And then if they need more paint, I'll put some paint in. I'll do that as needed, and then if I sit down and I'm going through my whole palette, I tend to fill up all the wells. But when I do, such as here's royal blue, so I'm just going to squeeze some royal blue into there. And sometimes I'll use my toothpick to cut the little stream of paint off, but I didn't need to there. But you can see how the consistency of that is a creamy consistency. And I'll mix it up with a toothpick and I'm good to go. Now that'll set up a little bit. It won't be quite as moist as it comes out of the tube, and different paints have different characteristics. Some are a little thicker than others or have a stiffer consistency. But I'll do that, and I'll go through my palette, I'll add my paint, I freshen it up where it needs to. This is a paint here that I rarely use, and some of the liquid vehicle starts to separate from the pigment. but it's still very wet because I keep water in there. And you can see that I can just mix it right back, and it's good to go. So that's the process I use. It doesn't work for everybody. There's probably not a lot of people maintain it like I do, but that's what works for me. So if you've been wondering how I keep my paint so moist, that's the process I use. If you want to join my mailing list to stay informed or learn more about my online learning center, you can click on the boxes on the screen.